Hey everybody, welcome back to Iron Culture. It is me, Eric Trexler. No Dr. Helms this week, but we are in luck. We have an esteemed guest with us, and this is going to be a fun interview because unlike our dear Dr. Helms, I know very, very little about Olympic weightlifting. So I feel like I'm almost more qualified to do an interview with an Olympic weightlifting coach because my questions are absolutely genuine. I won't be just teeing you up with pretending to not know things. So we are joined today by Wil Fleming. He is a level 5 senior international coach with USA Weightlifting and was an assistant coach of the 2024 US Olympic weightlifting team at the 2024 Olympics. Where were those?
Those were in Paris, France.
In Paris, France. Beautiful. So Wil, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Excellent. I'm talking to you from Firda, Norway, which is the site of the 2025 World Championships in weightlifting. And Norway is beautiful. It's a little bit rainy right now, but overall, it's been a great experience. Just got to watch a U.S. lifter, Olivia Reeves, set snatch, clean and jerk, and total world records on her way to winning, her, I guess, third world title now. So, yeah, good day.
Awesome. Fantastic. And you have one athlete competing?
Yeah, I had one athlete compete already. She's a 58 kilo lifter from Belgium. And then I have a super heavyweight female from the United States who will be competing on Saturday.
Nice.
So just a couple days.
Very cool. All right. So, Wil, like I said, it's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to pick your brain about Olympic weightlifting because, for some context, usually the show is hosted by me and Eric Helms. He and I share the fact that we both kind of did PhDs related to exercise and nutrition. We both have competed in powerlifting and bodybuilding. He also basically hit for the cycle and then some when it comes to strength sports. So he did some stuff with, strongman and, Olympic weightlifting. And people are going to crush me for this, but what is the one where you wear the kilt? Do you remember the name of that?
Yeah,
Highland Games, yes.
Right.
I'm going to get destroyed by the
Yeah.
Iron Cult, our esteemed listeners of Iron Culture for forgetting that. But yeah, so Helms does a little bit of everything. But Olympic weightlifting, I would say, is one area where we do have some blind spots, some lack of coverage here. So it's really exciting to get you on here. So the first thing I want to invite you to do is kind of give us an idea of your background. So obviously, it's not about establishing your credentials. If they invited you to be a coach of the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team in 2024, that speaks for itself. They know what they're doing. They care about what they're doing. So clearly, you know a thing or two about weightlifting. But how does one get there? What was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I can trace this back to like my involvement in Olympic weightlifting. I started in 1997. So right around this time, 28 years ago, I remember a very particular play in a football game when I was like a sophomore in high school, and we were playing our crosstown rival, and this kid just murdered me, just horribly, just blocked me. I was 5 yards back down the field, watch a guy high step over my head for a touchdown, and I just kind of I remember coming off the field and go, man, I'm not strong enough. And it just so happened that my brother, he was a 2-time Big Ten champion in the shot put. He was at Indiana University at the time. And he said, hey, that kid who, ran for the touchdown, he lifts at IU's weight room in the evening after we get done with track practice. So you should check it out. So day after the season is done, I go over there and I say, help me get better at football. Like, I heard you can help me do that. And these guys said, we're an Olympic weightlifting team, so you have to compete in weightlifting. But yeah, you'll get better at football. And if they had said we're a bodybuilding team, if they had said we're a powerlifting team, if they had said we're a strongman team, whatever, I would have done it. And so it's pure happenstance. Now, I got really lucky. My first coaches, one was the president of USA Weightlifting. The other one had been an Olympian in 1992. He went on to be the head coach for Team USA for a number of years at the 04 and 08 Olympics. And so I walked into this place with really, really good teachers, but that was just it. It was just that I wanted to get better at football, and I happened to go into that place. And then since then, it spurred me on to do a lot of stuff. I got to live at the Olympic Training Center when I was young for weightlifting right after high school, became a track and field athlete. So And I did shot put and hammer throw, and took that to the Olympic trials. But then weightlifting was always in the background and piece of that. And then, got into the gym game where, I started coaching. I was all strength and conditioning using Olympic lifts, but I asked a kid who was going to quit playing soccer, who had and he was probably 110 pounds, but he had a 185-pound clean. I was like, maybe you should try weightlifting. And he got really good at it. And then I started growing a team and, kind of dove head first into making sure I was the best coach possible. So that's been the last 14 or 15 years that I've been coaching weightlifting. But prior to that, I was involved as an athlete.
Awesome. Yeah, I can totally relate. So you said you were in Indiana when you were playing
Yeah.
football, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up in Ohio, and I got into lifting at the age of 12 because I was like, listen, football is the main religion in Ohio. We're neighbors, Ohio and Indiana, so you get it.
Yep.
And yeah, I want to be good at football because most young kids in Ohio want to be good at football, right? And so if you're not already big and strong, there's one way to do it, So
Yeah.
yeah, to me, that was the same kind of thing that kind of spurred my trajectory of, you get into lifting, you eventually figure out either I like the lifting more than the sport I'm lifting for, or I'm just better at lifting than the sport I'm lifting for, and you go from there. So that's one of the nice things about sports that I think is sometimes overlooked is obviously there's a lot to like with sport. With football, of course, there's always concerns about injury, but what you take away from it has so much, it extends so far beyond the sport itself, in terms of building those social bonds, just the ability to socialize with your teammates, all those things. And then ultimately you walk away with a whole new set of interests in many cases.
Yep.
So,
Sure.
to all who are listening, if you got young ones, consider getting involved in some sport of any kind, and they may accidentally catch the fitness bug.
For sure.
So currently, like we said, you're very much deep into the coaching game as it pertains to weightlifting. And we're going to get more later in the interview into kind of the mental side of weightlifting, which is often overlooked. But before we do that, this is kind of fresh on my mind. I teach an advanced weight training course right now,
Mm.
and we just covered the Olympic lifts. And so basically, it's teaching the Olympic lifts to a group of people, some of whom are already quite strong, some of whom are not yet. That's just not where they're at in their journey. And so I've had a lot on my mind lately, more than ever, about kind of the whole idea of building up these kind of baseline capacities and kind of working your progressions and how strong do you have to be? How comfortable do you have to be with all these progressions before you dive all the way deep into, putting the full lifts together, the clean and jerk and the snatch. So, for people who are listening, maybe they're quite strong. Maybe they're just getting started into lifting. How do you kind of explain that kind of, I guess you would call it intermediate to long-term athlete development of taking someone from stepping in a gym to now they're proficient in the clean and jerk and the snatch? What's your general approach to that?
Yeah. I would say that there's prerequisites, just like anything, any advanced subject. And I would consider Olympic lifting to be one of the more advanced subjects you could potentially get into in the gym. And with any advanced subject, you want to have these prerequisites knocked out. And they would look like, a competent squat, right? That is, a high bar-ish squat. There would be pretty vertical torso, feet can stay flat on the ground, get a pretty good semblance of depth. That could be, we could be concurrently working on that. If somebody comes in and they already have some mobility restrictions because they've done X, Y, or Z, and so we may be concurrently working on this really good vertical looking squat. I definitely think that there's the capacity to hinge with a level of competence, and understand that you how to brace your midsection while having soft knees, but your hips are going back. That is potentially, if you've ever coached a kid, might be the most difficult thing. At some age, you just can't do it for 10 years, a 12-year-old boy cannot figure out how to hinge, the ones that do are magical, they're like, whoa, where'd you come from? So yeah, so there's that capacity to hinge, the like competent goblet squat or front squat or high bar back squat or something. There's I always have like an exposure to plyometrics, jumping and landing mechanics, so that I understand how to produce like some vertical force into the ground and then resituate myself to land. The Olympic lifts are pretty similar to a jump in terms of the mechanics that we see like the top, where the body's kind of situating itself, like the hips or the knees kind of moving back under so we can get some vertical force from a hinged position. So those would be maybe the number one prerequisites of like specific movements. And then there's going to be some like capabilities where it would be along the lines of adequate shoulder, external rotation, just really like kind of competent shoulder movement that doesn't also involve the lumbar spine, because like you might take your hands overhead, but you have some compensation where you get too much extension in the lumbar spine. None of those do we want. We want to be able to maintain a pretty neutral spine position while taking the hands overhead. And once we have, those general pieces, then we jump into those, like what that intermediate level is. And that's like the pieces of the lifts. And that now it is a front squat. It's not a front squat, back squat, or goblet squat. It is a front squat, and it is an overhead squat. And then I'm like a big, in weightlifting, it's like the lamest argument in the world. Like, should you teach somebody how to do it top down or bottom up or something like that? I always like start at the top because I want people to see where they're going, and it seems to work pretty well. But there's other people who would say, oh, you should teach from the floor up. Teach like it goes from a deadlift up, and I think it goes from a front squat down. And so I think those sorts of things all come into play. And then if you're teaching athletes how to Olympic lift, you may never. I mean, I would probably suggest you never go from the floor, because the size of the bumper plate, the disc, is totally arbitrary. It's like the first disc loaded barbell was built in 1913 or something, and I can't find any reliable information about who it was, how tall this guy was, why he built it that way, and it's just like, but now you must lift it from the floor, and if you're not, whatever. But if you're teaching an athlete, elevate it on a box, do it from the hang, whatever, because he didn't care if you were and is teaching an athlete or yourself, he didn't care if you were 6'5", he didn't care if you were 5'2". Like, this guy just built this barbell, and they're like, oh, cool barbell,
Yeah.
And so I think that's totally arbitrary, pulling from the floor, unless you want to compete in weightlifting or powerlifting or whatever, and then you have to learn to pull from the floor and have the requisite mobility to get to those positions. But other than that, like if you're just using them to feel more athletic, get a little stronger, pull from the position that's most advantageous to you with the greatest range of motion that you're able to get.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's the thing I always kind of harp on with my students is, because they're on YouTube, they get content about lifting, and, they always, especially now, the kind of flavor of the month is more range of motion is always better. And I have to kind of continuously tell them, like, okay, generally, yeah, we love to have a nice full range of motion when we can, but it's really important to scale it to, first of all, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you need to do in order to make this effective? And ultimately, what's going to be comfortable for you? And so a lot of them are really surprised when I tell them, like, I fundamentally don't care when you're doing a lat pull down if the bar touches your clavicle.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
we really don't need that. And so a lot of them kind of expect me to be a stickler about that. I'm like, that's such an arbitrary thing to care about. Let's aim for the clavicle. If we can get it to chin level, that's probably going to be plenty,
Probably fine, right?
Yeah. So you brought up an interesting, not to do too much of a detour, but something that I think is a bit controversial in the strength and conditioning world, especially like I spend more time on the team sport side, in the sports science realm than I do on the Olympic weightlifting side. Because any number is greater than zero, and I'm not involved with Olympic weightlifting. But there's always a lot of debate about how much should team sport athletes who compete in something that's not weightlifting, how much should they be integrating the actual full Olympic lifts versus how much should they be incorporating some of the more simplified kind of progressions, right? So maybe doing high pulls, or all the various progressions that you might throw in there. which often kind of cut out some of the more technical aspects or kind of truncate the lifts a little bit. You know, there's, like you said, if you become a very good weightlifter, you're going to get good at sport stuff. But then there's always that question of, well, as a strength coach who has limited time with these athletes and needs to make sure we're not hurting shoulders in the gym and things like that, how much time do we allocate to some of these kind of progression type exercises versus the whole thing? Where do you stand on that?
Well, and like progression versus whole thing. I don't think any team sport athlete needs to do full snatches, full clean and jerks from the floor, catching deep squat, whatever. I don't think that that's necessary. I probably want every athlete I coach to be capable of it because they're probably a really competent mover, right? I talked to Tim Saha, who had been the strength and conditioning coach for Boise State and then Washington with some of their really good programs with Chris Peterson. And he said, like, my goal is that all of my offensive linemen can do full clean and jerks, right? Pull it from the floor, catch them low. He goes, that means they got healthy hips, they got healthy shoulders, they got healthy backs. Now, they don't all end up doing that, but if they can, it's probably it's fine, like if they're moving well. But you can get so much of the benefit doing hang power cleans or hang power snatch, or I am a huge fan of like the muscle snatch, which is it maybe a longer pull, no rebend, pretty low impact on the shoulders because you're just kind of turning it over. Everything I've done, I wrote a book at one time called Velocity-Based Training for Weightlifting. Muscle snatch is going to have some of your highest power outputs of anything because you're moving a pretty decent load a really long distance, right? So those like that velocity is really high, and therefore the power outputs are really high as well. So if you just want an Olympic derivative to help with power, I say, hey, go do a muscle snatch because it's this long pull, huge power outputs. And so, yeah, I think derivatives are going to be fine, Now, that said, I don't think jump shrugs with the trap bar are comparable, right? I do think there's just from everything I've done with like velocities and power outputs and all that kind of stuff, you're just gonna hit a little higher peak velocities, a little higher power outputs when have the intent of turning it over. There's maybe it's a high pull, or I did a bunch of stuff with a tendo at one point to like compare power outputs, and the only pull, even if it was a jump, was kind of this like hand release pull. So you'd pull it so high and just drop like at the top. And that would get comparable power outputs to the actual lift at the same weight. And so the derivatives are great. There's inherent benefits of turning the bar over because you're actually reaching some of those higher speeds. There's, with lack of a better term, because I know that force absorption doesn't occur, like receiving the bar makes you create force in that opposite direction up into the bar. And if you look at a lift, like you might see, if you look at a lift, it's like force curve. There'll be a little spike at the beginning. It'll go flat, a bigger spike when the athlete finishes. It'll drop off because they're weightless. And then bam, it like actually is when that bar hits, like that's the highest stiffness moment that they're going to have. So receiving the bar does create a lot of force as well, as the athlete is receiving a bar from space, basically, and trying to meet it really well. So, I think there's benefits, but I'm just like, hey, pick the one you can do. And the biggest thing on coaches aside, like if you're a strength coach in a college or a high school, like if you're going to spend time coaching in there, like you would tell me, I don't want to do the Olympic lifts because, well, you probably, if you know how to coach it, you should do it. If you don't know how to coach it, don't do it, right? Go take a course, see if you can feel comfortable with it. But if you do know how to coach it, I'm a coach. So if I'm in the weight room, I want to coach people. And one of the best ways to get a lot of hands-on coaching experience is trying to teach kids how to Olympic lift. And so we've gone to little high schools and taught 40 kids to clean and hang snatch and stuff like that, or hang power clean, hang power snatch. And it usually turns out really, really well. You'll have a bunch of competent people, and you might have 3 people in the room. And you're like, you're not doing that. And then we switch. And I've coached athletes from middle school to I've had MLB players, NBA players, all that kind of stuff. I had a guy come to me who was in the minor leagues, baseball player, wanted to get faster, stronger, all that kind of stuff. We never Olympic lifted. He had never lifted in his life when he was 21 years old. And I had him from the time, from about October to February, right? Till he had to go to spring training. Well, I wasn't going to teach him to Olympic lift. So we do the high pulls, we do the jump shrugs, we do all that stuff, right? And he, broke the MLB stolen base record that season, so he got faster and stronger without him, for sure. And, but, you also just know your clientele, know the people you're working with, know the athletes you're working with. Can they do it? If, get as many as you can to do it, the ones that don't need it or can't achieve it, can't learn it fast enough, we'll find other stuff. That's fine. Totally fine.
Yeah, no, I got my start working with middle school and high school athletes as a strength coach. So I was actually a strength coach before I ever did anything, one-on-one personal training type stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's in the
so,
that's
yeah.
in the visible.
I remember
these kids how to do stuff,
Yeah, no, I remember it wasn't my first experience, but one of the first ones. Our football coach was really big on building a culture. This was a large school in Ohio, kind of Division I, the biggest school division. And so he was really big on, like, when we do our first workout for the year, I want freshman through senior in that weight room to build this culture from day one.
Yeah.
So I remember walking in, seeing about 125 people in the weight room. Some of them were still finishing 8th grade. And, the fact that they could walk without tripping was kind of amazing. Yeah. And so, you get in there and you're like, okay, I'm going to teach not just 25 of these kids to do it, but 25 8th graders at the same time how to do it while we have 75 other guys doing stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Talk about growing up fast in the weight room, man. Crazy.
You figure out what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. And you figure out quick, right? Especially because in that room, you literally have a kid who's 13 years old, who can hardly move, right? And you also have a kid who has a scholarship lined up to go play football at Miami, right? And they're in the same room doing the same template. So, but my question was, when you're working with new athletes, and you're trying to teach these Olympic lifts, to me, the hardest part, I don't know if this is your experience. I know you've done this a million more times than I have. To me, the hardest thing was getting them comfortable, whether it's the clean or the snatch, catching in that low hip position, in that deep squat. Is that always the sticking point with you?
Yeah, I would say, no, I was really fortunate. Like, my teachers when I was young always were like, it's always a power clean, it's always a power snatch, but as it gets heavier, you take it down. Or once you get it, then you ride it down, right? Was the kind of idea. So you meet it. And so what that does is the best lifters meet the bar, right? They don't receive the bar. It's not hitting them. They're meeting it. They find it in space. They turn their body over and do it. And that's like the piece of athleticism that's kind of like, you kind of got it or you don't. And then we got to really work on it if you don't. But yes, so what you don't want to create is kids who just dive under, you know what I mean? And so that's like, that deep squat can be really a sticking point because some kids go, oh, I need to get down there. I'm not gonna finish with my hips. I'm not gonna get tall. I'm just gonna kind of teleport to the bottom, and the bar swings out or something, or they let the bar crash on them, or any number of things. So yes, that's always like a really hard sticking point. It's a transition between those athletes who can power snatch and full snatch, or power clean and full clean, and it can take some time, like, and I always say, like, with weightlifting, if I get you to do like a hang muscle snatch, which I could probably do in 10 minutes, as long as your hands go over your head, you're getting power output benefits. I could probably load that with 5-10 kilos in each side. You're producing a significant amount of power. And so it's beneficial right this second, like within a few, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, one session, whatever you want to name it. And then it's just countless, it's endless refinement. It's endless, like, okay, we got to work on this. We got to work on this. We got to work on this. And in a lot of weight rooms, you should just probably, as long as that catch is not getting wide like a starfish and their feet are kind of staying underneath them, then we're pretty good with however they start receiving it, and some kids get better going under, and some kids kind of just stay catching high for the rest of the time they're, in that weight room.
Yeah. And so, I mean, theoretically, I'd imagine, somebody starts with this kind of approach where it's just, hey, meet the bar where it's at, get as low as you need to, but we're not just going to arbitrarily go ass to grass every rep.
Yeah.
So eventually, the people who I assume stick with it, get good at it, decide they really want to start pushing it. At a certain point, the only way to keep moving the weight on the bar up is going to end up being you better catch low, right? Unless you're going to be able to throw infinite stacks of weight way up to shoulder height, eventually you're going to have to learn how to ultimately catch that at a lower position.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the fun thing about weightlifting in my head. And I think like it's kind of a popular master sport, right? Like 35 and up. It's
Yeah.
got a pretty decent following because there's always this like kind of lever. You can pull this lever, you can pull the technique lever, which is get better getting under, or you can pull the strength lever. It's like, oh, but my squat went up, right? Oh, pull this, and then these kind of keep climbing up, and so yeah, you're either getting at some point you reach the bottom, and that's called your max, and then you got to increase your max. Like you got to increase your max through the traditional means that most people think. Like, okay, and squat's really highly correlated. In weightlifting, we have this idea that your front squat's 85% of your back squat, your clean and jerk's 85% of your front squat, and your snatch is 85% of your clean and jerk. And so that back squat's actually kind of a driving number a lot of times. Like increase that, everything just drags up along with it. Some people are more front squat sensitive, and you just got to increase the front squat, not the back squat. But yeah, we're always like chasing that. Pull the technique lever until it's like good, and then get stronger, and then keep fixing problems, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought up that this has a lot of popularity with masters athletes. We like to tease the co-host who's not here, Eric Helms, about his advanced age. We don't know the exact number. We're trying to raise funds for the carbon dating, but this is a very old man. And he got into Olympic lifting, very late into life, I would say. So he definitely he kind of fits that mold of had pushed the bodybuilding powerlifting stuff and started to get that itch of like, ooh, I wonder maybe if I can push some other technical elements of lifting and yeah. So what's really interesting about that though, the way that you kind of lay out that long-term development is, at first, we're talking about doing fairly straightforward, pretty traditional stuff in order to build up some of those initial capacities. Then we start incorporating this technique, and then you have this long trajectory of technique refinement, which never really ends for a lifter, right? But you start with the massive refinements, and then you get into the granular refinements. And then you kind of re-enter that phase where now you're like, well, I'm pretty darn good at this, so it's back to the basics, right? Like I need to be able to pick up really heavy things, squat really heavy things. So it's interesting how it kind of takes that arc, in the long-term development perspective.
For real, for real. Yeah. And I think, I think that's probably also touching on the masters thing was like, masters will come in with a basic level of strength, and they might spend years just technically refining, and they haven't even tapped into their strength. And then suddenly they're like, wait, I got to get stronger again. And maybe, they might not have as much capacity to do so. But yeah, if you look at like, a newer athlete, who comes in, it's like, okay, they're just infinite potentials. You're pulling the levers like this, and there's going all the way up. My female, who I'm coaching here from the United States, she started weightlifting when she was 28. She was a track and field athlete, was a 5-time All-American in the shot put, but then had retired and was kind of living life, and she got recruited to come to weightlifting because they had heard she was strong in college, but she hadn't lifted in 4.5 years. And she comes in at age 28 and makes the Olympics 5 years later at 33. And her thing was she had such like this base of strength, like she had squatted 500 or 500 pounds in college. She had hang clean 300 pounds. She had benched 275. She had deadlifted 500 pounds. So it was like, sure, she wasn't that strong when she started, but it was just all that potential was already there. It was real easy to get that strength really high. And then it's very consistently technical refinement with her for the last like 5 years. That said, where she hit a lifetime squat PR earlier this year. She squatted 250 kilos. She clean pulled which is basically a deadlift, but finished with kind of a shrug. She did 230 kilos for a triple and stuff like that. So, just pulling on these. Now we're back into kind of, let's see if we can twist that strength thing just a little bit more to just get a little bit more out of you.
Yeah. I always love when you hear about athletes that kind of have like a second phase to their career, and you do see this a lot. Like it's really common, where you'll hear about somebody who was like really strong and really fast, and they're like, "Hey, come out for the bobsled team," and they
Yeah.
untap this huge second career in athletics that often surpasses their first. Same
Yeah.
thing like something that's a little bit lesser known, but since I'm in North Carolina now, NASCAR is really big. Man, they go find former linebackers and running backs and say, bro, get in the pit crew, right? And so people
Yeah.
have this whole second career where they're taking a lot of that kind of base strength and physicality and power output, and they're repurposing it for this other sport that they never thought about getting into, right? It's just like somebody called them and said, you should do this. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
That's actually what happened to my athlete. Our high performance director, his name's Mike Atone. He was kind of sent a video of her hang cleaning almost 300 pounds in college. And like, it was 4 years old or 3 years old. And, when he got the video and he just like called her up and was like, "Hey, I got your name from somebody. Would you be interested in trying?" She said, "Sure." And it was like, oh gosh, like she could have just as easily said, "No, I'm good," but she said, "Sure, that sounds good." You're like in charge of it. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then, yeah, under 5.5 years later, she's in the Olympics. So
Man, that's crazy.
yes.
All right, now, Will, I appreciate you playing along, answering some of my dumb beginner level questions. But one of the big reasons that we wanted to bring you on, I know that you have a book coming out. Is it out yet?
No, it's coming out. It's probably looking at November 1st launch right now. My editor got a
Cool.
little behind.
Yeah, hey, it happens. But so your book, do you mind giving us the title?
Yeah, so it's called Strong Mind. It's a weightlifter's guide to resilience and mental toughness on the platform.
Yeah. So I wanted to introduce the book and the title because you mentioned before we recorded that weightlifting is the ultimate test for mental skills. And you said that, and I left it alone. I didn't pry, but now I'm going to pry. What do you mean
Yeah.
by that? Why is weightlifting the ultimate test for mental skills?
Weightlifting is super binary, right? I mean, it is inherently binary. Yes or no. You made it or you didn't, right? Um, and in competition in particular, it's binary. It's you. There's no opponent. It's just a dead weight that doesn't want to be lifted, right? It just wants to sit there. And then you just go for powerlifting too, right? I'm a weightlifter, so I talk about weightlifting a lot in the book, but this goes for powerlifting as well. And, there's this, if I just think of meet day, that from the time your name gets called to the time you get on the platform, everybody's experienced that self-doubt, like, ooh, can I make this potentially? Or maybe they have great self-talk and they're like, hell yeah, I'm going to make this. But everybody's experienced some level of failure. I missed this, and how do you bounce back? And the other piece that I always think is in training as you go along, because we're based solely in numbers, there's this comparison game that is constant, right? I'm better than I was yesterday. I'm worse than I was yesterday or last week or a month ago or 1 year ago. I'm better than that person or I'm worse than that person, They're gaining on me or I'm, getting worse. All these different things, all these potential opportunities for negative self-talk, self-doubt, spirals, all this kind of stuff. So I think that it just really tests us when you get into the competitive side of things, and it's always testing us, right? There's not really, in baseball, you strike out, you come off. Okay, hey, everybody strikes out 2/3 of the time. 2/3 of the time you get out, right?
Yeah.
If you strike out, yeah, right, yeah, you're good. You're a good hitter if you get on base. If you hit it every third time. And so in baseball, but that's like just part of it. And oh, you swung and missed at a pitch. It's not a failure. I got another shot. Weightlifting is like I got 3 snatches. I got 3 clean and jerks. You probably only compete once every 12 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. Like there's a finite number of times you compete. So it's just always confronting. I feel like I always say that it's very confronting. It tells you like, are you weaker than you were? And that can mean a whole lot of things. That can mean, am I weaker mentally in this moment, or am I weaker physically, whatever, or am I stronger? So I just think that weightlifting, strength sports, those one-off kind of things where you have very limited attempts and you don't compete very often, really, really challenge your mental game.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, and it's interesting because for better or for worse, as someone who's done powerlifting and bodybuilding competitively, um, with bodybuilding, the upside and the downside is that it's subjective, right? So when I show up to a
Yep.
bodybuilding show and my question is, will I win? Well, one of the big questions is going to be, well, who shows up, right? Like, I mean,
Who
you never
shows up?
really know. Yeah, who else is going to be there? And so you have no idea until the day you get there, and you understand, like, hey, if the number 3 guy in the world shows up and stands on the stage with me, I'm not going to win, and that says nothing about me really, other than I'm not top 3 in the world. And then at the same time, the judging is entirely subjective, So if you wanted to delude yourself into saying, "Oh, that was rigged" or whatever, that I got, they docked too many points because my tan was smearing. It has nothing to do with my physique and my skill in this sport. You can kind of give yourself those narratives if you like, but yeah, with powerlifting, gravity's on, and it's the same every day.
Yep.
The bar is going to tell you what you got, and there's no hiding. It just is what it is. And one of the interesting things that you mentioned is you said that you've seen the mental game sabotage more athletes than their physical prep. So I'm curious
Yep.
what you meant by that, and what is kind of the most common mental issue that you see that actually holds people back in whether it's weightlifting or powerlifting, this type of strength sport?
Yeah. So, I wholeheartely believe that. A number of things is that, I think there's a bunch of people who can write a good program, right? Like, there's a lot of like good programs out there. There's a lot of people who can teach you how to clean and jerk or snatch, right? So, like, on the physical side, there's like a lot of good stuff, right? There's you're a PhD, you could probably come up with a good program, very scientifically sound, and it would work really, really well for Olympic weightlifting. It might need some refinement, but it largely is going to get people really strong. And I wholeheartedly believe that there's like so many good coaches out there. There's good programs. People understand technique pretty well. But to me, like, the difference on the platform is that mental game, right? The difference between the person who you can see coming out, or here's where it shows up the biggest is after a miss, right? What does that person look like after a miss? Most everybody misses in weightlifting. 4 or 6, six people make about 60% of their attempts. So just a little less than 4, they make 4 out of their 6 attempts. Is kind of the average number. And you can see it. You see somebody after a miss, what they look like. Oh, this head in the hand, shaking their head, like, like hitting their head, like, I'm gonna, whatever, right? You can see their self-talk. Sometimes they're saying stuff to themselves. Or you see somebody who's like, yeah, whatever, like, let's go, next one, like next one up. So you can see that kind of stuff. And the people with the crappy self-talk who are just like, I suck or whatever, I got it, or look defeated as they take that. I know pretty well they're probably going to miss the next one. But the people who are coming off like, yeah, I got this, or like, that's on me, like taking ownership because now they're already processing that they made a technical error, those people tend to come off and make it. And to me, last quad, I had a couple girls trying to make the Olympic team, one from Canada, one from the United States. And both of them, the kind of qualification procedure last time is you had to be in the top 10 in the world. And there was a couple other pieces. Both of them are top 10 in the world lifters, right? And in training, both of them did top 10 numbers lots of times. And one was able to break into the top 10. Now they struggled mightily in training, comparing themselves to what so-and-so do. How am I feeling? Like, what about, I don't feel as strong as I did 2 weeks ago or 1 month ago, or, whatever. They would struggle with that. So that's that like comparison game, that conflict all the time. The other one might've been a little better at that stuff, but on meet day, she would, oh, the self-doubt, right? One miss, like almost like a physical change in demeanor and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the one who struggled a little more in training on meet day, just a calm cookie, right? Had been in battles before, had been, this is Mary. Mary was like a calm, she had been in battles. She had that experience. She built up that armor, all that kind of stuff. She had been a great track and field competitor. So she'd been in big track meets. So like the competition was a little easier. So I think that, you then asked, what's the biggest mistake you see? And to me, it's that reset after a miss, right? Everybody's going to miss. You might miss a warm up. Weightlifting, missing a warm up is pretty common. On powerlifting, less so, but weightlifting might miss a warm up. You're probably going to miss an attempt on the platform. And it's like, what do you do to keep from spiraling? Like going down that, oh, I suck, or I looked ahead and now I can't achieve this goal. So what's the point? All that kind of stuff. And just having some sort of reset, like kind of acknowledge that you missed, like kind of acknowledge it, figure out why you missed, like then stop it. Like I always say, like take a breath, do something, like slap your legs. Like if you need to get a little more arousal, it's like you need to get up, slap your legs. If you need to come down, breathe. But it's like acknowledge it, reset it with something like physical, and then we would move on to like correct it. Like what is the thing that's going to correct that next one? And it's just very black and white. Like I missed, here's why. That's in the past because I did this physical thing. Move on. What are we going to do? Because misses, bad outcomes, all that kind of stuff. And, and that goes even then, not after miss, the after a bad competition, what happens, what's that look like? And so like all these ways to reset, like misses, bad competition, they're just data. That's a data point. Gave you some information and you need to turn it into something. It's not a reflection of who you are, not a reflection of your identity, all that kind of stuff. That people would just go too deep on that stuff. It's like, this is data. How can I use it to get better?
Yeah. And, when Helms isn't here, we've already talked a little bit about American football. When he's gone, I talk as much as I can about American football. He resents it. So when he's gone, he can't stop me. But it kind of reminds me, like right now is college football season. I love college football.
Yeah.
But like you're watching a team, right? And so they, let's say they're on defense first, the other team drives, gets a touchdown. Okay, no big deal. You're down 7-0. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
You go 3 and out, you're about to punt. They block the punt and score a touchdown. Now all of a sudden you're like, whoa, it's 14-0. And you start running the stats in your head and you say teams that give up a blocked punt for a touchdown lose more often than not. It's like 80-90%, right? Then you start running the numbers. Teams that go down 14 tend to lose, right? So now you're already locked into these narratives where you're saying, not only do I feel bad about what happened, but this is the beginning of a collapse. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's so easy to see as a viewer teams that are well coached versus teams that aren't, because the team that gives up the block punt for a touchdown, they're down 14-0. They take the field and it's just execute. Right? We watched our film, we're making our reads, we're calling our plays, we're executing. And that's all there is to it. If a coach can get their team to go out there and say, I'll worry about the score, I'll worry about the time, that impacts play calling. It doesn't impact you making your reads and executing on the field, right? And you can physically see the teams that keep their head on straight and the ones that don't, and the ones that don't, they start, the quarterback every time is going for the deep ball rather than just playing in the system, right? The defensive backs are going for the interception rather than keeping the good positioning and making the tackle, right? Instead of giving up 8 yards, you give up 65 and a touchdown. So do you see a lot of that with weightlifters where, sometimes they kind of have that early setback in a meet and now they start trying to like throw Hail Marys with their attempt selection, or maybe they go the other way and they just crawl into a shell and say, I just don't have it today, right? And so then maybe they just completely lay up their selections. Do you see people that have a tendency to do that? And as a coach, obviously your job is to say, well, no, we're going to go with what we think we can do, right?
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I'm a huge college football fan, and as an Indiana University grad, I'm a Kurt Signetti fan, and he's like done this huge turnaround at Indiana University, and his thing is like one play at a time, like execute the play, and that's it. Like every play is 6 seconds. He has this whole thing. We have short-term memory. Every play is a life of its own. So like you're down 14-0. All you have to do is next play out there, you have to do what you're supposed to do. And if you do that enough times in a row, like you're going to be back in the game. Like you said, their coaches worry about that kind of stuff. So I see that. I love that. And in weightlifting, I see like, a lot of times people come into a meet, they're like, I'm going to hit this total. Today I'm going to hit a 300 kilo total, right? And how are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to snatch 135 and I'm going to clean and jerk 165. And they go out and they make 125, they make 130, and then they miss 135. And then they're like, I should open at 170, right? In the clean and jerk. And it's like, no, that 165 was the top end. Today you're going to total 295. Now you're going, I'm going to choose 290 or 295 or zero, right? Don't go for zero, so yes, a lot of times when you see that transition from snatch to clean and jerk, it's like, okay, now I'm going to get my money back, right? It's like, no, that's not how it goes, right? Just like, so I always talk to my athletes about, give me a solid opener. Tell me we're going to figure out what your opener is. Maybe it's this 300 kilo total guy. Let me know that it's rock solid at 127 kilos. And then we're in, and then I'll make the calls. What's next, right? Based on what I see. Don't lock yourself into 135 as your top number, cause it's like, and don't lock yourself into 165 as your top. Let me make the calls there. Let's go one lift at a time. And you got to make your first warm up, your second warm up, your third warm up. People who think about their third attempts before the meet is done, they don't do well. Like if you think about your thirds before you've even opened, it's not happening. Cause there's so much you have to do before that time. So it's like, yeah, it'd be like in football, like I want to score 42 points today. We want to score 42. Nobody does that, right? Like you never talk about the final score beforehand, right? You want to say,
because then you think you're going to score 42. You don't score in the first quarter. Now what? You're just going to run the hurry up the rest of the game. You're running a 2-minute offense. Like it's ridiculous. Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean,
you gotta be careful of that, right?
Yeah. In my, I used to coach for about 5 or 6 years there. I was one of the coaches for a Special Olympics powerlifting team. So I'm very familiar. There's so many variables working with that population that like you don't even remotely get locked into second and third attempts, right? You know your first attempt, it's pretty conservative. You're going to see what happens that day. There's a lot of stuff going on. We competed once a year. Sometimes that environment of competing would really throw a wrench into, what we would expect to see. So, it's really hard to convince, because let's be honest, man, the sport is to put up the heaviest number you can, right? So no one's all that interested in the first attempt. Everybody's thinking about what's the most I can do, right? Yeah. So you're thinking, okay, let's play out this story as this beautiful thing that unfolds where I work up to the absolute 100% most weight I can possibly lift. And that is my third attempt. But if you get locked into that being the only way to succeed that day, like you're getting at, you're setting yourself up for a big risk. It could be the storybook ending, or it could be a really rough day if that's the way you're kind of priming your expectations.
Yeah, for certain. Yeah, I just, I even that, like, yeah, you just got to give me that opener. Let's be confident and then get in the game, right? Get that first thing going. And then like, and we always talk about routines, like being some of the driving force of that is like, the way to make each of those attempts feel really good is these pre-performance routines, not rituals, not like superstitions, not like I got to do this or whatever, but in training, practicing the routine that would go up to that so that I'm in that mode from the very start, whether it's, I would write out my routine and I have my athletes write out their routines like, oh, my name's been called, I chalk my hands, I pull up my knee sleeves, I say an affirmation like I'm, whatever, like strong, strong and chest up. Usually it's like maybe a 2-word thing. It's a power word and a cue, strong chest up. And then, then I chalk my hands, I walk to the platform and, pull, right? Or whatever. And it's like, I write it out every step with those words and I'm visually rehearsing it, or, kind of imagery based rehearsing it. And I'm doing it in training, right? So it's like, because I always think it's ridiculous if like I see somebody who trains pretty calm, they get to the meet and they're getting back slaps, face slaps, ripping ammonia caps. Like it's like, hey, you're probably amped for the meet anyways. Your arousal, you are good at a 7, but you're putting your arousal at 10. Like
Right.
and like, oh, why did I feel jittery? Why did I crash out after snatches? Well, yeah, you kind of freaked out. Like, like you're it's all none of that's bad on its own. If that's your thing, that's your thing. But make sure you get like a couple back slaps on a heavy day in the gym, so that you know what that feels like, and you hit ammonia in the gym once in a while. Like, so those routine, I think mapping out routines is a big way to then make first attempts feel like second attempts, feel like third attempts, make gym attempts feel like third attempts. So you've rehearsed. One
Yeah.
thing that I love the strength and conditioning side of weightlifting. Like I was a strength and conditioning coach. I think that's really cool. I love manipulating variables to see different things happen and all that kind of stuff. Like all that's awesome. But weightlifting coaches are also sport coaches, right? So I need to do stuff like practice. We say, how about another football analogy? Like practice a 2-minute offense, practice a hurry up, practice like rushing the field goal team out there, right? You practice. Good football is not just tackling and running and lifting weights. Good football is situational awareness. Oh my gosh, I'm like in weightlifting, the clocks can get real varied. You go out there and it's like sometimes you can lift 2 minutes rest, minute rest, 8 minutes rest, 10 minutes rest. You like just manipulating those. Try those things in training so that they're not unexpected and you get resilience. I always say that all the mental things I just call armor. Like their
Yeah.
armor. And, one of the things that, kind of going off of that is a lot of people, think like mental training, sports psychology kind of stuff is if you got a problem, right? Like
Mm.
I first saw a sports psychologist because I went to the 2008 Olympic trials in track. And I remember just like my legs tingling, everything feeling foggy. I like got super anxious. My biggest meet of my life, just crazy anxiety. And I was like, what is this? Right. And I was like, I got to figure that out. I went to a sports psychologist and we worked through that. But that's one thing. But we don't tell people that like, you should only squat because your legs are severely weak. You should just squat, right? Like if you're a weightlifter, you should squat. If you're playing football, like you practice all the different things. And one of the, we don't tell people you need to eat well because you're severely malnourished. Only if you want to perform, you should eat well. If you want to perform, you should train hard. If you want to perform, you should sleep. If you want to perform, you should work on your mental performance, right? And so I think that's like one of the things that I want to get across to like people in the gym. This isn't like I got a problem, I get anxious, I do this. Yes, that would help. If you had low iron, you could eat foods with more iron and like you could help yourself. But if you want a well-rounded performance, you need to work on the mental game piece of things.
Yeah. I have a hot take. I could be wrong, but I honestly, I totally agree with the way that we view sports psychologists. And I really feel like there was just a major branding issue. Like, I feel like if we from day one decided we're not going to call it sports psychology, we're going to call it mental performance coaching. I honestly feel like people would have a fundamentally different relationship with it because we kind of have lumped it into the like typical
Well,
kind of Western medicine approach, which is you don't go just chat with an orthopedic surgeon to just say, "Hey, how are things looking?" Right? You go there when you got a problem, right? You
yeah.
you typically don't go and get mental health services from a psychologist until you have a mental health concern that you're trying to work through. And so I think a lot of people kind of from the phrasing sports psychologist, they say, yeah, when you get the yips or when you have a massive mental block on performance, only then do you break the emergency glass, pick up the phone and call a sports psychologist. But yeah, I totally agree. Like there are mental elements of sport performance that ought to be viewed as proactive training the same way we do with anything else we do for our performance, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not gonna skip out on your walkthroughs when you're learning plays. You're not going to skip out on your physical training, but with the kind of mental side, I think it often falls by the wayside. Now I did have a question. I really appreciated you kind of talking through, the value of a routine, right? And it sounded to me like the thing that came up to me was like a basketball player, right? When you're shooting free throws, I dribble once on the left, twice on the right, spin the ball, pull up my right pant leg and shoot, right? Like every basketball player you see, I'm at Duke right now. I've got the 5 championship banner behind me. You watch those guys practice. The way they shoot a free throw that means nothing in June is the same way they shoot a free throw that is for, you know, 3 seconds left in the final 4, right? It is
Yeah.
exactly the same, and it's the routine they've been doing every single time, probably since they were about 17 years old, you know?
Yeah.
But the one thing I wanted to ask you about on top of that idea of throwing those realistic scenarios into your training to build that resilience, building those routines that you can adapt to those different scenarios. Is there anything you do to preemptively train, like the reset or the cues that you might give after a failed attempt? Do you actually work with the athlete on what that's going to look and feel like beforehand, or do you play it by how it looked, how they responded, and kind of just go completely from scratch on that?
Yeah, weightlifting training is probably more miss-prone than other like strength sports. Like I have powerlifter friends and I never see them miss in training, right? Like ever, right? I've got a buddy who I don't know if he's ever missed a
It's
squat.
ugly when you miss in powerlifting
Okay.
training. Like it happens, but
Yeah.
ugly.
I mean, weightlifting, there is that such a technical demand that you'll miss, right? I mean, I've heard of, you hear legends of, oh, this Russian didn't miss for 8 years, like stuff, something like that. But usually you're going to miss, right?
Yeah.
We're here at Worlds and we trained this morning and my lifter missed an 80 or a 90% lift or an 88% lift today. It was just technically it was out and it was wrong. So when you miss, you want to be ready for that. So none of the stuff that I would say like that I think is important on meet day should be implemented on meet day, right? It should be implemented, like you said, in June. And so it's like, yeah, we definitely talk about that reset. What's that going to look like? What's your reset? We might, as a team, we'll say, hey guys, we're going to talk about this. What's your reset? One of my lifters, she's like, I got to pinch my thighs. So it like brings me back to the present. Cause I feel like if I don't feel my legs and I'm not there, or something like that. Somebody else like pinches their earlobe or pulls on their earlobe. Somebody takes a couple deep breaths, whatever that reset is. So yeah. And so we map it out. And then now I don't keep every reset handy in my head. Like, oh, Nicole does this, she does this, whatever. But I'm confident that they know what they're going to do because we practice it. And when they miss, hey, hit the reset. Let's try make sure you try the reset today. And maybe early on, it's just me urging them to, and they fumble with it and it's not natural. And it's like, oh, that didn't help me do much. We just keep trying. And then it starts to become part of this new routine. Right. And then on meet day, we're not pulling anything new out. Right. It's the same old cues we've been working on the whole time. It's like hands close. It's get, chest up. It's whatever those little things are. Yeah. So we'll definitely practice it. I think weightlifting lends itself to it because there's more opportunity. There's probably more missing in weightlifting than other sports. Otherwise I might, pressure treat them where it's like, put them in a bad situation, and maybe make them do imagery to be like, hey, okay, hey, it's your third attempt. You really need this one. The second one kind of felt heavy. What are you saying to yourself? Like, how are you going to get out there? What are you going to say to encourage yourself? How are you going to get yourself present? Are you going to hit, like, do you want ammonia? Whatever.
Yeah. And I assume, speaking of ammonia, probably one of the biggest things you're doing on meet day, I would imagine, is you build up this rapport with an athlete, you know how they do their stuff, managing that balance of not aroused enough versus too aroused. You already kind of alluded to that previously, but I mean, do you find that there's tremendous variance from athlete to athlete over where that sweet spot is if we put it on like a 1 to 10 scale? And so I assume you're just constantly kind of trying to steer them back to their sweet spot all day. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You're totally on it. And it's different from athlete to athlete for certain. I have, like a Marine who trains with me who, is pretty high level. He's like a national level lifter, top 7 or 8 in the country. And man, he's just so intense. And it's like, I don't, his 8 arousal is my 25, it's like, holy, I can't
Yeah.
like, what are we going to do? He's so, and with him, I think it gets overboard, and we've been working on bringing it down, right? And he is a
Yeah.
caffeine consumer, nicotine user, like, so he's physiologically, mentally super aroused. So I'm actually like, hey, you probably, let's reduce your nicotine usage. Let's reduce your caffeine usage so that like you're not like heart beating, out of your chest aroused, and you can still be that mentally focused and aroused and stuff like that. So just working with him to bring it down. I have
Yeah.
lifters who vary from meet to meet. I have an internet, like a very good lifter who one meet looks just, focused, like gonna rip your head off. They're very like into it. Other meets they're kind of away and like maybe more timid, and figuring out what that is. And it's usually the level of the competition and or where they think that they're expected to finish, or anything like that that can make them change there. So what's the optimal one? It's probably in between. So we've been working on those low days, bringing her up, on the high days, bringing her down just a little bit so that she's a little more. And you can do that through questionnaires. Like what is that? They might not be able to quantify I'm at a 7 arousal or something like that, but what do I feel like? I feel pumped up. I'm listening to this music. I'm listening to like death metal, and I'm pounding ammonia and you're slapping my back. That's a 10 person, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm calm, I got my eyes closed. You lightly tell me, hey, it's your turn, stuff like that. They're at 2 or something like that. So you figure out where they are and try to make sure that that's it. And then if the other thing with weightlifting, if you don't compete enough, if the outcome doesn't match what you want, you can also watch them in training, and you figure out in training, okay, actually when they lift best in training, they're laughing with their teammates, right? They're keeping it really light with their teammates. Maybe they're joking a little bit, and then they're like, turn it on, it's go time. So you got to keep it light when they're in the back or something like that. But everybody's a little bit different. If you pay enough attention to yourself or to the athletes you work with, you'll key in on what works, and then maybe figure out how to turn the dial up or down.
Yeah. A related question. I have more experience on the powerlifting side, but for weightlifting, between obviously this is going to depend, but what is the general setup of the sport in terms of like how many hours pass, for example, between the first time an athlete warms up for their first attempt and the time that they finish their final attempt for the day? What kind of duration are we talking for a lot of meets?
I would say it's like an hour and a half. It's pretty fast. I bet
Really?
typical weightlifting session. I was just at a really great session with somebody setting world records, and it was over and done with in like less than 2 hours. It was 10
The whole
women
meet?
in a session. Yeah, well, the session. Yeah. And so
Okay,
like,
yeah.
yeah, so your session is probably over and done with in 2 hours, unless it's maybe, and that's like, 12 people and less, 12 people and
Yeah.
fewer that will happen. But yeah, you're probably, and if you're
And
like,
in that session, you're doing your snatch and your clean and press. You're getting it all done.
yep. And so so what that typically looks like for them is, I bet you have 7 or 8 warm up lifts. You do a general warm up, you're moving and stretching and all that kind of stuff, maybe foam roll,
Yep.
whatever the thing is that you do, a dynamic warm up. And then you take probably 7 or 8 warm up sets. It could be doubles and triples at the start, and then singles. And then you get 3 attempts on the platform in the snatch. And they may be, if you're following yourself, like you are the last, because in weightlifting, the bar only goes up. So like,
Right. Yeah.
I could take all 3 of my attempts after all of everybody else's attempts that happened this evening. And
Yep.
so you might take your first, wait 2 minutes, take your second, wait 2 minutes, take your third. But the snatch portion's probably done in an hour, and then have a 10-minute break. And then you repeat the same thing for the clean and jerk, 5, 6 sets of warm-ups. Then you go out and take your 3 lifts, and it's done in another hour. But
That's
so I'd say
a beautiful thing.
yeah, it's fun. It's kind of fun. It's not like powerlifting, because powerlifting is like really a war of attrition. Like, did you eat enough? Did you eat again? Like we do. I tell everybody to eat between snatch and clean and jerk, because it is taxing. Try to get some carbs and something in them, in some form or the other. And but yeah, it's not like that powerlifting like grind.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because that's what I was thinking about with arousal is like one of the things that is often people overlook it. But let's say you do identify that you perform best at a high level of arousal. Great. but we need you to perform well at 9 in the morning and at like 6 p.m. and in between.
Yeah.
All right. And so with
Yeah.
powerlifting, I mean, these things will take all day sometimes. And so that's kind of one of the big things is like you identify what is your right level of arousal on the platform, but then you have to turn it off. Like I think
Yeah.
a lot of people go into it thinking I'm going to be just laser focused all day and be like amped up from 9 to 7. And it's just like, brother, no one can do that. There are very few people on this planet can do that. So yeah, it sounds like more so with powerlifting than weightlifting, you have to think of how do we turn that on and turn it off, and what is the appropriate duration of cooling down before we have to ramp that up again. But honestly, the more I hear about Olympic weightlifting, if not for all the coordination you need, it sounds like my kind of thing. I'm I'm always like annoyed. Like sometimes bodybuilding shows will take 13 hours, and you're like, how is this possible? What are we doing here? Since it is such a short thing, do you get the sense that Olympic weightlifters go a little bit lighter on the water cuts compared to powerlifters? Just because it's like you're pretty much right onto the platform. You don't really have as much time to kind of refuel and rehydrate and things like that.
Yeah, on the water cuts, we have we're 2 hour weigh-ins. There's actually talks that we may become a 24-hour weigh-in sport, but that's not confirmed. But in a 2 hour weigh-in scenario, if you cut much more if your total cut is much more than is like approaches 5% of body weight, unless you have this insane squat reserve, you're going to feel real performance effects. So a lot of times I kind of aim to be 2 or 3% over and train there for a significant amount of time so that the numbers we hit in training are pretty real. Now, I think some countries, some coaches rely on bigger water cuts, but I don't find them to be very reliable. The best lifters I know, I'm going to go back to this lifter. I was watching Olivia Reeves, who won the gold medal in Paris last summer. She doesn't cut a gram. She lives and train. She's lifted at 77 kilos. She's heading up. She is trained at 73 kilos, and she wants to get a little bigger, but she just is what she is. And when she won the Olympic gold as a 71 kilo lifter, she was 70.9 kilos all the time. She'd never cutting weight. She was just kind of what she was. And that means that what you did in training really carries over to the platform. Now, with a 24-hour cut, you could probably do a lot more, right? Or 24-hour weigh-in, you could do a lot more. And I know that people do. So I think that would fundamentally change weightlifting if that were to happen. So I'm kind of not for that. But yeah, right now it's not a big, people will do it. People cut extreme amounts and be like, I can do it. But, you can't IV rehydrate in weightlifting. So, it's just kind of almost impossible to bring it back enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Even with wrestling, that was where my main sport that I focused on when I competed. And with wrestling, we would have our weigh in about 2 hours before the meet starts. But if it was a normal kind of, 16-man bracket, if you were pretty good, you kind of knew, okay, first match, 2 hours after weigh-in, I'm way better than this guy, right? I'm the 1 or 2 seed. This is the 15 or 16 seed. I could be half dead and I'm going to win this match, right? And so especially at some of the smaller local meets, right? So even with that, it would kind of lean into these kind of not super great habits of these really aggressive cuts, because a lot of people are thinking by the time I really need to be on, it's going to be my third or fourth match of the day. It's going to be 2 p.m. It's going to be 7 p.m. So the 2 hour wait, I think a lot of high schools, I think they're kind of going to mat side weigh-ins, or at least they've been kicking that idea around. I've been kind of out of the game for super long. I haven't been keeping tabs on it, but I heard rumblings that they were going to do walk up to the mat for your match, weigh in, and you basically have to maintain your same weight pretty much the whole day, which I think for high school kids is probably a very good idea. At the more elite levels, sure, let that be part of the sport if you like. But I always thought it was I mean, I participated, so hindsight's 2020. But now that I'm an old man, I look back and I'm like, it was crazy that as kids we were doing weight cuts and stuff, you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right. Well, Will, I don't want to abuse your time here. I really appreciate you setting some time to chat with us and teach us a little bit about weightlifting. Obviously, you got your book coming out. So do you have like a pre-order link or anything that we can put in the show notes for people?
Yeah, sure. There's actually I'll put it in the show notes. There'll be a like a meet week mind mental prep kit for you, kind of get you ready through walking you through imagery, walking you through the act of putting your pre-meet routine, walking you through the idea of what kind of maybe identity you want to have. And here's a clue, like your identity isn't 150 kilo snatch, that's just a lift. It's like I want to compete hard, I want to like give it my all. That's identity kind of stuff. And so just walking you through all those things to set you up for a really good meet. I'll give you the link you can put in the show notes. But that's just a free download. And then when you download that, you'll be put on the list for launch for the book.
Awesome. Fantastic. And before I let you go, any last words of wisdom for people out there who maybe are thinking about getting into weightlifting, or maybe they have their first meet coming up, something like that?
Yeah. You know, if you're thinking about getting into weightlifting, it's a really fun sport. I think it's like, not to knock anything else, but it's like a thinking man's strength sport, because it rewards that technical aspect so heavily. So if, you can really, really dive into the technique and become kind of a nerd over it, and get some really big returns. So, yeah, I love it. I still do it. I like don't compete anymore, but I did snatches 2 days ago and did cleans today. And I will always, as long as I can, do some level, and they're just fun to do.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, before we go, we got to give a shout out to our good friends at Elite FTS. It's Dave Tate's operation out there in Central Ohio. They are friends of the show. We ask humbly that you will support our good friends. We got a nice little partnership with Elite FTS. So, folks who are listening, if you need some new lifting gear, maybe you're getting into weightlifting and you're like, hey, maybe I should get some wrist wraps, knee sleeves, all sorts of various items that you may bring into the gym. Or just some good old-fashioned apparel, go to elitefts.com, use our discount code MRR10, that stands for Mass Research Review 10, and you'll get 10% off most of the items in the Elite FTS store. As always, if you like the show and you want to support, there's many ways to do it. Make sure that you like, rate, subscribe, review, tell a friend, share a link, get the word out. And of course, if you really love the show and want to give us the top tier of possible support, be sure to check out the Mass Research Review over at massresearchreview.com. That is what keeps the show running. And if you become a member of the Mass community, you will be absolutely on the cutting edge of the newest research and how to apply it as it pertains to exercise and nutrition. So everyone in the Iron Cult, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again to Wil Fleming for joining us. Everyone take care, and we will see you again in 1 week.